oh, wow, we're all just having these always thinking. And a lot of those thoughts aren't positive because we have over 60,000 thoughts a day, 80% from the day before, and 90% of those are negative. So we say, okay, the solution must be mental health because our thoughts are the problem. But the truth is they work in unison. And once we feel safe enough and we learn how to regulate our nervous system, then we can move through that feeling. And that's what clears out the mind. You can't think your way out. You have to feel your way through it.
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. What I didn't tell Sam Kabert, who is a TEDx speaker, best-selling author, former Silicon Valley entrepreneur, who is now podcasting, who's now helping people with regulation and a whole host of other things, is that I have been working with a former Zen monk for the last couple of years, working on some of these very same topics. So I was super excited to get Sam on the podcast. And Sam, thank you for being here.
Yeah, Annika, I'm stoked to be here. I'm excited to see where this takes us, and I'm here for it all. And that's amazing. You've been working with a Zen monk for the past couple of years. That's very cool.
Yeah. I had to figure out what I needed to let go of, what baggage, what self-doubt, all of those things to be able to be a better me for myself and then for those around me. But let's unpack your journey a little bit, because you had a number of businesses in Silicon Valley. I mean, you're, again, a TEDx speaker. You've done so many things in that area. Silicon Valley, 40 under 40, 3-time best-selling author. Talk about that journey and then what led you to kind of leave that behind.
Yeah, I mean, I was just wearing a mask of false positivity, right? Acting like everything was good. I kind of knew something was off and something wasn't feeling its best. And this is back in 2019. And I wasn't too comfortable talking about like feelings and emotions and things like that, right? But I remember going to dinner and talking with a friend, and she told me about this experience she had called the breathwork journey. Just her and her breath, with a facilitator one-on-one for about an hour, hour and a half. And her experience was so profound that I remember being like, I'm going to do it. I don't know what this is all about. I don't understand it, but I'm just going to do it. So within a week or two later, this is back in April or so of 2019, I drove from Silicon Valley out to Santa Cruz, a beach town where I live now, and knocked on the door. Didn't really know what I was getting myself into, and then left that feeling like, what the heck just happened? Like I literally felt reborn from that experience. And that's what set me off on my path of spirituality, self-discovery, remembering, and all the things. Yeah.
Wow. The fact that one meeting, one exercise can completely set you on a different trajectory is truly, that says a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as you went on this journey, what was it like to untangle yourself? Or when did you have the realization that, yes, you've been putting on this false positive facade, but you really yearned to do something else? So you started the journey, you felt like you were reborn. But then what did it look like to leave Silicon Valley, leave behind some of those trappings and the things that made you not feel like you were being authentically yourself?
Yeah, Annika, that's a great question. It was unfolding. It wasn't something that just happened right off the bat, but I did end up changing so many things in my life. That breathwork journey was just the beginning. Like I went into that feeling numb, depressed. I say feeling, but really not feeling at all, to just feeling light for the first time in my life, understanding what it meant to feel light. And the facilitators actually also facilitate ayahuasca, the plant medicine for healing. So I sat with them in an ayahuasca ceremony a few weeks later, and that just took everything to the next level. And I remember one of the big things in regard to leaving Silicon Valley was I had previously bought my house 5 years to the month when I did that ayahuasca journey. And I remember saying to myself when I bought that house in Silicon Valley, like, I'm just going to live here for like 3 to 5 years, then I'll move to Santa Cruz, like, and figure out where I want to go from there. Cause I always looked at like Silicon Valley as like, quote unquote, doing my time there. Right. So in that ayahuasca journey, one of the main messages that came through was, hey, it's time to move from Silicon Valley and move to Santa Cruz. And that journey was actually, now that I think about it, that was in April of 2019. And then 2 months later, as I'm like starting to feel into over the course of the next 2 months, as I'm feeling into it, okay, what would it be like to like move my entire life? It's only an hour away, but the whole thing, right? And owning a home and all that. And researching and looking at houses and things like that, one day in June, it hit me. I was like, oh my God, it's been 5 years to the month now. And I totally forgot that I initially had that plan. And there were so many little synchronicities like that where I was just like acting on the wisdom that was provided in these deep journeys that I was doing, that when I was integrating, acting on them, it would click, be like, oh yeah, I remember this. And wow, how'd I go to sleep and forget about that, whatever the thing was? So it was really unfolding to change so much of my life. And that's just one small example.
Yeah, wow. Well, let me backtrack again a little bit. What prompted you to feel like you had to do your time in Silicon Valley?
Hmm.
Because when I look at your background, when I look at even your bachelor degree, it seems like it was in something that's much more in tune with nature and earth
Sure.
and a different kind of life than what we think of as Silicon Valley.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the area. I mean, I grew up in the area, a town called Gilroy, which is 30 minutes south. So it was really like a moving home. But the deeper drive below that, like the greater problem that I was addressing on an unconscious level, was I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel enough. And that's what manifests as like having this chip on our shoulder. Because
Mhm.
for most of us that use our motivation, our burning desire as like that chip on the shoulder, why are we doing that? What's behind that? Well, it's a lack of feeling worthy. For me, that stemmed all the way back from childhood to never being like the most athletic kid or never being really stand out in any kind of ways, to college, where at one point I actually got a DUI and I just thought my life was over. I was just so ashamed of myself. And I was like, how could I do this? And I was like, okay, I'm going to use this as fuel and motivation to do something positive in the world. So, those are just a couple of examples where I had that like chip on my shoulder, but underneath, behind that chip on my shoulder, was just not feeling worthy. And that's what created that drive. So Silicon Valley being like my home, pretty much to what you mentioned before we hit record, I went to school at Chico State, a small town in Northern California, and I started a business there, and it wasn't big enough. The town was too
Mhm.
rural, it made sense to go home to Silicon Valley where there's all these big businesses and it's much easier to build a business like what I was building.
Yeah. And what was that first business?
It's called Swagworks. I actually finally dissolved it last year
Oh.
after 14 years or something, and probably 4 years of working my way to get out of it. But yeah, Swagworks, I had a few different brands over the years. I started it when I was senior in college. We did branded merchandise, swag. So my personal brand was Swag Sam at the time. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, so putting more material things into the world, but helping people
exactly.
also brand themselves. Two things that are, one maybe not as good for us, and the other one something that we all need to be able to get business, meet people, make connections like we are right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, especially you being in the branding industry as well, I'm sure you'll appreciate this. At least for me, most of my clients were more larger businesses, like tech companies or larger hospital that people would know, or, financial institutions, things like that. And as a kid, I loved the movie Robin Hood. And as I reflect back, I kind of looked at like, my version of being like Robin Hood. Not that I was stealing from corporate, but, it's much easier and it feels feels a lot better to sell like a $30,000 or $50,000 project to a project manager or corporate where they're just like, it's fine versus the work I do, mental and emotional and spiritual coaching now. It's a lot more personal and I'm working with a person versus a business, right? But from the branding perspective back then, where I really wanted to get out of the business, it wasn't so much the consumerism. To me, consumerism's more like if we're looking at the world of swag, branded merchandise, if a client wanted, the latest trend, like a fidget spinner where kids were choking on the bearings, or they wanted just another selfie stick or whatever it was, I wouldn't sell them that item because I would pick up the phone and either talk myself out of a sale or get them into something that I thought would be more beneficial to their brand. So I was really authentic and, consumerism wasn't really the issue. It was more materialism because I started to see how so many of us in the corporate culture, in myself, we outsource our worth to these different brands. There was one specific example with tech company that everyone knows. And I remember we were just having some troubles with a Patagonia or North Face jacket, and they wanted to get like the wrong size for someone because we're short on sizes as opposed to the wrong color. So I was like, wait a second. You're going to spend like $300 on this jacket and it's not even going to fit the person, but we do have it in another color, but that's not going to work. So you're going to give them a jacket that won't fit. I understand like there's an issue here. There are other jackets that we can look at as well, by the way, So that was one of those bigger things that I was just like, this doesn't make sense. And this just doesn't align anymore,
Yeah. As a business owner myself, I can tell you that finding the right people to hire is absolutely brutal. You post a job, get flooded with hundreds of resumes, but somehow still can't find anyone with the actual skills you need. It's like searching for a needle in a haystack, but not with ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter finds amazing candidates for you fast. And right now, you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/work. Here's what makes ZipRecruiter different. Their smart technology actually identifies the top talent for your specific roles super quickly. The moment you post your job, their matching system starts showing you qualified candidates immediately. Plus, you can reach out to your favorite candidates right away using their pre-written invite to apply messages. No more waiting around, hoping someone will notice your post. Ditch the other hiring sites and let ZipRecruiter find what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Try it for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/work. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/work. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Yeah. I think it's easy for all of us who have had any of those feelings of lack of self-worth, right? Not fully belonging to a place or trying to prove ourselves. It's very easy for us to fall into other people's ideas of what that should look like and what life should look like. And it sounds like that was part of what you were seeing is there's not a fit here, right? And yeah, I've experienced the same thing before as well in different cities that I've lived in. And at the end of the day, though, you still have your unique skill set. You still have your values. And it sounds like going on this journey with the breath work and then ayahuasca ceremonies and then moving physically as well, not just mentally and emotionally, helped you see what path you did want to go down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It was a journey. It was unfolding. I didn't know what was next. And I joined Spiritual Mastermind in January of 2020, which was the best thing ever because I needed that so much, that community as we went into the pandemic and there was just so much growth. And I was in that community for 2 years. Then I did a yoga teacher training, started teaching, leading yoga, leading a men's group and, all these different things. So it's really been unfolding. And I think for anyone listening that's kind of going through that same path, like, it's really connecting with our intuition. And sometimes we're saying yes to something and we don't necessarily consciously, intentionally know why, but it just feels right. And just kind of paying attention to that breadcrumb trail and just listening and acting on it,
Yeah. Yeah. It can be easy just to keep on going, but then usually something big happens and makes us stop. And that could be an accident, an illness, something happening to somebody close to us, or going to lunch with a friend and hearing about this remarkable experience they had and feeling this resonate with your soul.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So talk about, you physically moved, you sold your house. I'm assuming some things happened there to help your journey along. You got different certifications. So what do you do today? And what does that look like for us?
Yeah, I got really deep into NLP last year. I quickly became a master practitioner of NLP and just recently a certified trainer of NLP. And NLP stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming. It's the study of the unconscious mind. Most of what Tony Robbins does is stemmed from NLP. And, you know, it's just so fascinating because I went really deep on spirituality and I love like all the woo and that stuff.
Mhm.
And to ground into nervous system regulation with breath work. And that was kind of the beginning. Then starting to do some self study around the unconscious mind, I was like, oh my God, this is the missing piece. It's the unconscious mind. And it took me all the way back to when I was 23 years old and read for the first time my favorite book, Think and Grow Rich, and just being like everything Napoleon Hill was talking about was the study of the unconscious mind. Or we look at Neville Goddard, Emile Coué from the early 1900s talking about the unconscious mind. And it's really like my greatest passion to share that. And I think one thing that is really important for people to understand is when we are talking about mental health, we're prioritizing the wrong thing. You know, right now, it's amazing that we are destigmatizing mental health.
Mhm.
But for those that want to be on the path of the early adopters or the wave that's coming or really make a big impact in your life, what's coming is emotional health. And the reason is because, and a lot of people don't understand this, but anytime we have a thought, that sends a signal to the body and that creates a feeling. So as Dr. Joe Dispenza would say, thoughts are the language of the mind and feelings are the language of the body. And what happens is anytime we experience, say, an unwanted thought that creates a undesirable or quote unquote negative feeling, then on an unconscious level, most of us don't feel safe. So we're unconsciously avoiding, distracting, and numbing from that feeling. So then that feeling doesn't get felt, the energy doesn't get released, and then it goes back up as a thought, and we start ruminating in negative thoughts. And mainstream society and culture says, oh, wow, we're all just having these thoughts, always thinking. And a lot of those thoughts aren't positive because we have over 60,000 thoughts a day, 80% from the day before, and 90% of those are negative. So we say, okay, the solution must be mental health because our thoughts are the problem. But the truth is they work in unison. And once we feel safe enough and we learn how to regulate our nervous system, then we can move through that feeling. And that's what clears out the mind. You can't think your way out. You have to feel your way through it.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can see how it can be hard for somebody who doesn't live in a state where they're in touch with their emotions. It's just, this is totally related, but also an aside. I was rewatching Pleasantville with my daughter this weekend. Now that she's a little older, she understands a lot more of the movie. But we were talking about how it's really when you find passion and emotion is when you come into color in that world, right? And so it's just funny that we literally just watched that yesterday, and then you're talking about this today on the podcast. And I'm like, yes, that is so true.
It's such a great film. I remember watching that when I was young, and that would be a good one to rewatch. I love movies and just seeing like the spirituality that's hidden in movies. Like, how old's your daughter?
She's 17 now.
17, but you guys have probably either independently or together watched the Barbie movie, right?
I don't know if she has actually. So
It's funny because the Barbie movie was like one of the most deeply profound spiritual movies that most people didn't even understand. They might be like, okay, yeah, I remember the ending and that was pretty deep. Yeah. But there's so many other things that people don't even know about that were being portrayed, such as the Hopi prophecy, which I could riff on that. But I love watching movies and just seeing the hidden spirituality in them.
yeah.
Yeah.
And how messages are getting to the masses without anybody realizing it. And obviously we're at a time in time, space, earth, where we need to be thinking about these things and be more in touch and in tune with ourselves, because there's a lot of stuff out there that can help make people feel really strong negative emotions, whether you're looking at the press or whatever, belief system you have politically. If things are affecting, if tariffs are affecting your bottom line, whatever the case may be, I think that people are starting to realize and wake up to the fact that we need to put things into practice to help regulate ourselves. And I would start going down like very woo-woo stuff, but I'll keep it simple for this podcast. But, I'm right there with you. So I want to talk about some of the work that you do now via your podcast, via your teachings.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Would love to. So I have a 2-day event coming up in September, the end of September 28th. Time recording this is early September. So podcast, it's always evergreen, all that. But I'm getting into more 2-day trainings, like in-person type events. So I'm super, super excited about those. Those are immersives, and it's kind of like an introduction to NLP, but in my own way. It's not just like the study of the unconscious mind. A lot of it's about nervous system regulation, I was talking about before, with mental and emotional health. So I'm super stoked with those events. And then every single week I lead free breath work through my community called the Breath Club. Every single Wednesday we have a 30-minute session where people are coming in, and we're doing a little bit of a community share at the beginning and the end, and then about a 20-minute breath work exercise. And what's really cool is each session is totally unique. I ask people like, hey, what'd you come here for today? Some people want stress relief, anxiety. Other people want energy. Some people goal setting, whatever it is. So I like to say it's kind of like throwing it all in a pot together, creating this stew, and then you never know where the journey is going to take us. And each one is so unique. And I just love that. So yeah, that's called Breath Club, and it's free. And anytime someone joins as well, they get access to over 20 pre-recorded breathwork exercises, so they can do them on their own time. So yeah, that's pretty much my main thing. I do coaching. I get hired at conferences to do workshops, keynotes, things like that. It's a fun lifestyle. It's a very different than what I was doing before, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm really excited and love to share this work with people.
Was it a pretty big adjustment, or was it just you were ready to do something new?
Yeah, I mean, back in 2019, I knew I wanted to get out of the swag industry, and then the pandemic helped that. My business was shot, and the business never recovered. And, I think it's important when we're going through these periods of, for lack of a better word, awakening, or just prioritizing our mental and emotional health, whatever it is. It can be so easy for a lot of us to just be like, oh, I'm going to quit my job, my career, my business or whatever, and do this other thing. And that usually doesn't pan out well. Well, for me, like, I had a great plan because my business was on autopilot. So I was like, I'll be fine just kind of figuring out what's next. Well, then comes the pandemic, not fine. Yeah. So I tried to recover the business for a couple of years there, from 2020 to 2022, 2023 a little bit. And I was just like, my passion's not here. And I was just more responsive than anything else. And then last year, it was pretty much crickets with the business. It's been that point 5 years. I was like, what? It's just time for this to go. So it took a process. I mean, to get here now. I got into the work that I'm doing now with like speaking and coaching on mental, emotional health, spirituality, performance, all these things about 3 years ago. So all of it's been quite a transition, but nothing sudden.
Yeah. What was it like to get your first client when you started letting people know that you were doing this work?
Yeah, I love that question. In 2019, after like getting into this work, I started to do some coaching, more business coaching, because I didn't know what else to do. And I was like, well, I know business. And then in 2020, I did a program. I think it was called like Heroes Course Builder. It was a course where I was teaching spiritual minded entrepreneurs how to build their first course. So it was a little bit of a mix of like professional coaching along with like where I was moving towards like more spiritual, mental, emotional coaching. And I remember one of the group calls, this is back in 2020, and I just kind of sat back as like the group on Zoom is all like communing, and I just had like one of those moments with like a slow, soft tear like coming down my cheek, just being like, oh my God, this is alignment. This is awesome. This is what I want to do. I'm stoked to experience this, and I want to do more of this. So that was the beginning. And it was a slow transition of, getting into coaching, business coaching, and then making it more deep and like really very much personal as opposed to business.
Yeah, that's amazing. And how hard was it to rebrand yourself from what was the Swag Sam
Yeah.
Too spiritual, Sam.
Yeah. Actually, some friends were calling me Soul Sam.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, I definitely had some people encouraging me to rebrand, but no, I just retired the Swag Sam brand at some point. And as you know, I went to Chico, party school, whatever, lived above the most popular bar, top frat, all the things. So, at the time when I was getting into spirituality, especially as like a man, right?
Yeah.
And having a lot of alpha and like meathead type friends, I was calling myself a recovering bro because it helped to soften it. I've been on content like you for a long time now, and we put ourselves out there and we're vulnerable. And, now I'm talking about, at least at the time, some very woo and esoteric type topics. So I would call myself covering bro, almost like, hey, I am cool. I was cool, like I wasn't always this way. So again, these are great questions. It's taking me back down memory lane. And I think the common theme here is like slow transitions, nothing
Hmm.
sudden.
Yeah, that is such a good point. I think that's how I've built my brand as well. It was actually a hobby, and then, this podcast, and then I realized it was actually a business, and then figured out how to make it really work and also have that confidence in my own abilities, right? It could be hard to know to hang your shingle and to go out with something new when you had a different thing that you offered before and you're not doing that, you're really trying to move into this new direction. And you also started your podcast around the same time all of this transition was happening in 2019.
Yes. Yeah. So I had a few podcasts in 2017 through 2019, and then I retired all those podcasts and started Soul Seeker in 2019. Yeah.
And what has that experience been like in conjunction with these other journeys that you've been on?
It's so funny because, I look back, Soul Seeker's about to have 300 episodes. You're probably around the same number because I think we've been going on our shows for about the same, something like that. I don't know. But if we were to look at like the early podcasts, a
Mhm.
lot of things about like spirituality, the meaning of existence, of life, plant medicine, like ayahuasca. Then there's all this stuff about like the human origin story. And then there's stuff about like aliens and, just all this like really out there stuff. And that was the first 3 years. And then the last 3 years, it's been much, much, much more grounded. So, like,
Mm.
the podcast is a representation of my own journey.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's common for when people go through like a psychedelic awakening type experience to be like, I want to go deep down the rabbit hole and like, just woo, woo, woo. And like, the meaning of existence and all of that. And then at a certain point, it's like, okay, we are here to be humans and to experience everything. And it almost becomes a disassociation from the human experience. So
Mhm.
my message ever since 2019 has been that of soul life balance rather than work life balance, where we prioritize both the yin and the yang or yang. In other words, our inner and external
Mm.
worlds. And, I definitely went pretty deep there for a while on the soul side. And now I feel like I have a good balance of both being in the external world of obligations, responsibilities of the human doing, and the inner world of the human being of mental, emotional states in connection to something beyond this human experience.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I'm going to have to dive into some of your older episodes.
Totally.
You help high performing leaders and entrepreneurs, such as what you were doing in Silicon Valley. So, at what point do you see people coming to you? And do you think that because you have this background, you understand where they're coming from, it's made it easier for them to come to you to seek whatever they need?
100%, because, as high performers, visionary leaders, entrepreneurs, executives, whatever label we want to wrap and package it in, many of us are just so excellent at the doing. And one of the things that was so eye-opening for me that I actually learned through NLP, what I call the creation codes. You see, because back then I was operating from this level of I can do anything. I literally wrote my first three books in less than a year. I can do it, right? And people would be like, Sam, how are you able to do so much? And I was like, VAs. They're like, what do you mean VAs? And I was like, virtual assistants, like, okay, if there's a weakness I have, like graphic design or web development or editing my podcast, I'm going to find someone that can do that so I can focus on either my writing or interviewing or whatever the thing is, right? And because if I were to try to do the graphic design, do the editing, the formatting for books, and all these different types of things that I'm not an expert in, I wouldn't be able to get done. And so it was a pretty simple formula. So I would do, then I would have the outcome. And then I finally had time to be. And when I had that time to be, I was like, I don't know who the heck I am. Like, what is all this? So in NLP, they talk about going from being, doing to having, whereas most high performing leaders are like myself, the previous version of myself, we're operating from doing, having to being. And when you transform this from being, doing, having, all of a sudden you become extremely congruent with who it is that you are, what you want out of this human experience. And then you take that energy and you do from there, and then you have that end result. Another way to think is I was saying to myself on an unconscious level, when I achieve ABC, I will feel XYZ. I didn't consciously know I was saying that to myself, but when I was setting these goals and then I would achieve the goal and then I'd be like, I kind of feel the same. Okay, let me just set a bigger goal and then get caught in that hamster wheel. And that's the trap that high performers get into.
Yeah, for sure. You answered the question about the books because that was one of my questions. And then when it comes to TEDx, was that with your current work or was that with the,
I don't know if that's your experience, but at least for me and a lot of people I know, the past couple of years have just flown by. But yeah, the TEDx feels like it was a couple of years ago. It was just last year. It was a year and some months. That TEDx, I talked about the trap that I just mentioned of the unconscious creation of when I achieve ABC, I'll feel XYZ. And then I also talked about soul life balance and the three things that you can take: breathe, feel, think intentionally. Basically, we can process emotions as little as 90 seconds. How do we actually do that? Breathe, feel, think intentionally.
Nice. Yeah. Fantastic. I want people to go to your website and go to the Breath Club. I think that's a really fantastic give back to bring people together just to breathe and to their, mindset and brain set and emotion set for Wednesdays and the rest of the week. Yeah. So thank you for offering that to people. And we'll have links to your website and to the Breath Club and everything in the show notes. Is there one last thing that you would like to impart on the audience today?
I think it's just a mindful pause, a really simple way to bring about more presence in our day is just taking a mindful pause in between tasks. Like you and I are going to be done with this podcast here in a few minutes, right? And then I could easily just go check my email and then go the next thing and blah, blah, blah. But if I can pause for just like a few seconds, maybe even just take 3 deep breaths and be like, okay, what I just did was completed. That's transformation energy. I'm going to work on new energy on the new thing that I'm going towards, as opposed to carrying all these different energies with me and then feeling bogged down because I've never actually taken the time to check in with myself. And so easy way to do that is just a mindful pause between task switching.
Yeah. 100% agree with that. When I do that, the day goes so much better. So, but sometimes I look at my calendar, I'm like, I forgot to do that. I forgot to add in that time, that pause. So that's fantastic advice. And then Sam, last question. Do you have a favorite quote, mantra, family motto, verse, poem?
Yeah, the one that came to mind, I kind of just roll with what's coming to mind a lot of times because I'm so into like the unconscious mind, which is just building with your intuition. So I take it someone probably needs to hear this, but a quote that really helped me when I was in the thick of it 6 years ago was hang out with people with a common future, not a common past. This is from James Whitaker. The quote is hang out with people with a common future, not a common past.
It's very deep and very, very important. So you've left us a lot to think about today.
Wait.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show. And thank you to everybody who's watching this episode or listening to it on your favorite platform. I'll be back again with another amazing guest to share their story, their journey, and some things that will make your life a little bit better every day. Until then, have a beautiful day. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.